That afternoon, I had just come back from the supermarket, arms full of grocery bags, when I saw Elijah, my son, standing in the living room. Sunlight streamed through the window onto his face, but it did nothing to soften his cold expression. I hadn't even had time to ask before he spoke straight out, his voice flat but sharp as a blade. "Mom. I'm tired of seeing you every day." I froze, my hand gripping the bag handles so tightly that the plastic dug into my skin. "What did you just say?" I asked again, hoping I had misheard. Elijah didn't look away. "I want space of my own. You're here too much. Even my wife feels the same. You should find another place so we can live our lives." His words hit me like a slap in broad daylight. I heard each one clearly, as if someone were carving them into my mind. This house. I bought it. With my money. The deed still bore my name. I had paid it off completely, without debt. Just because I wanted my son to have a good start, I willingly moved into the smallest room, living together for a while to support the couple. And now, I had become a burden. You really mean that?" I tried to keep my voice steady, though my chest felt weighed down by a stone. Elijah looked uneasy for a moment, then stiffened his tone. "I'm only saying what both of us think. You know, my wife has never been comfortable with you living here." I looked him straight in the eyes. "So I gave up all my money to buy you this house, and then I'm the one who has to leave it?" He stayed silent. The silence of someone who didn't want to argue, but also felt no remorse. Outside, a car drove past, the sound of its engine fading. Inside, I could hear nothing but my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Never in my life did I think this day would come, the day my son would look at me as if I were an object to be pushed aside once I was no longer convenient. I drew in a deep breath, set the grocery bags on the table. "Fine," I said, "just one word. No arguments. No begging." Elijah flinched slightly, perhaps expecting me to cry or lash out. But I only walked back to my room and shut the door. The cold wall against my back, I slid down onto the floor. The dizziness hadn't worn off. I remembered the day I handed him the keys to the house, remembered his radiant face, remembered his promise, "Mom, you'll always have a place here." All of it now just broken fragments of memory. From the living room, I heard Elijah talking on the phone with someone, his voice light, relaxed as if he had just rid himself of a burden. And then I understood. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This had been planned. And I had just been informed. My chest tightened. But deep inside, another thought stirred quietly: if they want me gone, I'll go. But not empty-handed. I sat there in silence, listening to the slow ticking of the wall clock. Each tick like a knock on my skull, making my thoughts sharper. If Elijah had decided this, then I would find my own way. But not with tears or pleas. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Martha, my friend from the old town library. I answered, forcing my voice to sound normal. "Abigail, are you free this afternoon? I just baked that apple pie you like." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I'll stop by. But first, I need your help with something." Half an hour later, I walked out of my room with a small handbag. Elijah looked up, frowning. "Where are you going?" "Out for a bit." "Don't wait up," I replied curtly. He opened his mouth to say something, but his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, then dismissed me as if I had already faded from his sight. I met Martha at the cafe near the bus station. When she heard my story, her face darkened. "He said that to you? In the very house you bought?" I nodded. "And I think, it's time I moved out. But I won't leave anything valuable behind for them." Martha rested her chin on her hand, her eyes glinting with understanding. "You're thinking of selling the house?" I answered, "Not just selling. I'll sell it quickly, quietly, before they can react. They think I'll slip away in silence, but instead, I'll take everything that belongs to me before disappearing. The plan began that very night. Martha introduced me to a trusted real estate broker, Mr. Jacobs, who had once helped her resolve a tricky inheritance property. He agreed to meet me discreetly at his private office, away from public channels. We sat under warm yellow lights, discussing the details. "You want to sell full ownership? The deed is in your name, right?" he asked. "All the legal papers are mine," I replied firmly. Mr. Jacobs smiled. "Then it's simple. I know a few cash buyers. If you agree, I can close the deal in less than a week." A week. Too short for Elijah and his wife to realize what was happening. I pictured them coming home after a long day, only to discover the house was no longer theirs, and strangely, I felt calm. When I returned home, Elijah was out. The living room was silent. I looked around one last time, every piece of furniture I had chosen, every photo on the wall. Soon, none of it would belong to them. I opened my computer and sent a confirmation email to Mr. Jacobs: "We begin tomorrow. Keep everything strictly confidential." As I hit send, my hands no longer trembled. I was no longer the woman who merely endured in this house. I was preparing to leave, but this time, I would take everything that was mine. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. Autumn light slipped through the blinds, casting a pale gold glow across the kitchen. I brewed a strong pot of coffee, poured it into a white ceramic mug, sat at the table, and opened my old leather notebook. Each page was filled with numbers, dates, and lists of the items I had bought for this house. An Italian sofa, Japanese knives, a dishwasher installed just last year. I marked the things small enough to take with me or sell separately. Every red mark was a piece of memory, but also a piece of property. At exactly 9 a.m., Mr. Jacobs called. "Mrs. Smith, I've contacted a young couple looking for a house in this neighborhood. They're willing to pay cash, but they want to see it as soon as possible." I replied instantly, "This afternoon, then." "That works. But do you want them to meet the family currently living there?" I was silent for a moment. "No. I'll make sure the house is empty." When I hung up, I knew I had to move carefully. Elijah and his wife both worked during the day, but I had to ensure they wouldn't unexpectedly return. I texted my son, "I'll be entertaining guests this afternoon, don't come home early." Elijah replied quickly, "Okay. Don't worry." So short and dismissive it struck me that, to him, my presence in the house no longer mattered. At noon, I began clearing some belongings. The valuable items I packed into labeled boxes. I would send them to the storage unit Martha had helped me rent. One box at a time, I wheeled them out to Martha's car waiting at the door. At 3 o'clock sharp, the couple arrived with Mr. Jacobs. They were young, dressed simply, but their eyes lit up as they stepped inside. They didn't know the story behind it all, they only saw a warm, clean house full of potential. I led them through each room, pointing out the details like a seasoned seller, though inside I felt both relieved and bitter. "We like this one," the wife said, turning to her husband. He nodded. "If you agree, we can put down a deposit right away." I looked at Mr. Jacobs. He gave a subtle nod, as if confirming everything was already falling into place. After they left, I locked the door and stood in the middle of the living room. This space had seen more than I wanted to remember: silent dinners, veiled remarks, and the moment Elijah bluntly told me he wanted me gone. Tonight, I would sleep here, but not because I was forced to stay. I chose to stay to look one last time before leaving on my own terms. On the kitchen table, the deposit contract lay neatly. Everything was in motion. And for the first time in months, I was the one behind the wheel. That night, I didn't fall asleep right away. I sat by the living room window, watching the streetlights filter through the trees outside. In my hand was a cup of hot tea, steam rising in swirls like the thoughts turning in my head. My phone buzzed. A message from Elijah: "Mom, can you watch Sophie tomorrow?" Charlotte wants to go out all day. I let out a quiet laugh, not out of joy. Sophie was my granddaughter, and I truly loved her, but the way Elijah wrote it made me realize, in their eyes, I was nothing more than free childcare. I replied, no. I'm busy. Just 2 words, but I knew Elijah would have to reread them several times. I rarely said no so directly. The next morning, I woke early. The garden was covered in a light mist, fog settling over the backyard. I made coffee and began the day's work, packing. Each rip of packing tape sealed off an old tie, cutting away at the chains that held me here. Around 10 o'clock, Martha arrived. She stepped inside, her eyes sweeping over the stacks of boxes. That's fast progress, she said. I want to be done before they start asking questions, I replied, handing her a list. These are the items for storage. The rest will go to auction. Martha helped me load the boxes onto the rental truck. The driver, a young man, didn't ask questions, just worked efficiently. I had already paid 6 months storage fees up front, enough time to get settled somewhere new. That afternoon, I received a call from Mr. Jacobs. Mrs. Smith, they've wired the deposit. I'll prepare the official sale contract and have you sign it on Friday. I looked at the calendar. Friday was only 3 days away. 3 days to finish everything and 3 final days to live here. That evening, Elijah and Charlotte still weren't home. I sat alone, eating a simple dinner, chicken soup and bread. The silence was so deep I could hear the clock's hands ticking. Strangely enough, it didn't feel like loneliness anymore. Around 9, they returned. I was still at the dining table, reading a book. Charlotte glanced briefly at the boxes but didn't ask. Maybe she thought I was just clearing some space. Elijah was busy texting, barely paying attention. Don't forget to watch Sophie tomorrow, Charlotte said, like an order, without waiting for my agreement. I closed my book and looked directly at her. I already told Elijah. I'm busy. Her brows shot up. She started to say something but stopped, perhaps surprised by my tone, calm, but unyielding. When they went upstairs, I looked around the house once more. Everything seemed to be slipping away from me, becoming the past. And I knew, when Friday came, I would leave this place not as someone forced out, but as someone who chose to walk away. On Thursday morning, I received an unexpected call from my old lawyer, Mr. Harris. He was the one who had handled the title papers when I first bought the house. His voice was deep and tinged with concern. Abigail, I just got a notice from a local bank. Someone's trying to use your house as collateral for a rather large loan. Do you know anything about this? I gripped the phone tightly. I have no idea. And who's behind it? Mr. Harris exhaled. The application was filed under Elijah and Charlotte's names. But the problem is, he paused, the file includes a copy of a financial power of attorney with your name, and the signature looks identical to yours. I closed my eyes for a moment. Not surprised, but still feeling the sting of betrayal. Mr. Harris, I never signed any power of attorney for them. That must be forged. I thought so. Do you want me to file an immediate objection and start a legitimacy check? Of course. And do it as fast as possible. I'll send you samples of my genuine signature. After hanging up, I sat quietly for a while. The house wasn't even sold yet, and already they were trying to turn it into a tool for debt. Clearly, my leaving wasn't enough for them. They wanted to exploit me until the very last moment. At noon, I called Mr. Jacobs, briefly explaining the situation. His voice was steady. Don't worry, Abigail. Once the sale goes through, any undisbursed loan applications will automatically be invalid. I'll make sure the house sale gets priority processing. That afternoon, I continued packing. Each item I boxed up felt like a line drawn underneath an old chapter. Martha came again, bringing 2 bags of food and a hot cup of coffee. Heard about Harris, she said. You're doing the right thing selling fast. If you waited longer, they'd find every way to tie you down. That evening, Elijah came home earlier than usual. I was in the kitchen when I heard the door. He walked in, his eyes falling on the growing pile of boxes. "Mom. Are you moving out?" I looked at him, half wanting to answer, half wanting to stay silent. But then I simply said, "Yes." Elijah bit his lip. "You don't have to." I cut him off, no need to explain. "I've already decided." He fell silent, but there was something in his eyes that looked like unease. I didn't ask. Not because I didn't care, but because at this point, any explanation was meaningless. When he went upstairs, I returned to the dining table, opened my leather notebook, and drew a line, "Tomorrow sign the sale contract." Tomorrow, this house would no longer be mine. And it would no longer be theirs either. And to me, that wasn't a loss. It was freedom. On Friday morning, I woke up feeling both eager and alert. Today was the day to sign the sale contract. But before I even got out of bed, I received a strange email. Subject: request to cancel the sale transaction. Sender: a law firm I had never contacted. The content was brief. Our client, Mr. Elijah Smith, claims that the current house sale transaction is invalid because he has residency rights and property interests in this real estate. We request an immediate halt to all procedures. I read it twice, then smiled coldly. Clearly, this was Elijah's last-minute move. But what he didn't know was that all ownership documents were solely under my name, and the bank records confirmed there was no certified agreement granting him residency rights. I called Mr. Jacobs immediately. He chuckled softly, "Don't worry, Mrs. Smith. This is just a delay tactic. We have all the legal documents. They have no power to stop us." I decided not to say a word to Elijah the night before about signing the contract today. The less he knew, the safer it would be. At noon, I drove to Mr. Jacobs's office. The sky was clear blue, but the air was crisp and cold. On the conference table, the file was neatly arranged. Mr. Jacobs, along with Attorney Harris, were both present. "You just need to sign here, here, and here," Mr. Harris pointed to each page. The pen in my hand glided smoothly across the paper. Each signature felt like cutting another strand of the invisible rope that had bound me. When it was done, I put the pen down and let out a soft breath. Mr. Jacobs carefully gathered the file and nodded. "All done. The money will be transferred into your new account within 24 hours. I set this account up at a different bank, and no one but you has access." On the way home, I stopped by a small store on the outskirts of town and bought a new suitcase. Not too big, but large enough to carry the essentials for the next chapter. I still hadn't decided where I would go, but I knew I wouldn't leave a trail easy to follow. When I got home, both Elijah and Charlotte were already there. Charlotte sat on the sofa scrolling through her phone. Elijah leaned against the kitchen doorframe, eyes watchful. "Where have you been all day?" he asked. I took off my coat and hung it on the hook. "Just took care of a few personal matters." Charlotte spoke up, her voice sharp. "Hopefully those personal matters won't interfere with this family." I met her eyes directly, but only smiled. "This family interferes with itself, Charlotte." She flinched slightly, then turned away. That night, as I closed my bedroom door, I set the new suitcase neatly at the foot of the bed. In my mind, only one sentence remained: tomorrow, I will leave. And when they realize, it will be too late. The next morning, I had just finished pouring a cup of coffee when I heard a loud knock at the door. Not a polite knock, it was urgent, pounding, almost like they wanted to break it down. I opened the door and found two police officers standing on the porch. One man, one woman, both in full uniform. "Mrs. Abigail Smith?" the male officer asked. "Yes, that's me." He held up a warrant. "We have a search warrant for this property at the request of the plaintiff, Mr. Elijah Smith. There's an allegation that you're attempting to liquidate shared assets without consent. I was calmer than they expected. Shared assets? This house is in my name. Solely mine. Please, come in, but you won't find anything legal to hold against me. They stepped inside and began checking each room. Charlotte and Elijah came rushing down the stairs. Charlotte was in pajamas, hair disheveled, but her eyes sparkled with anticipation, as if she were about to watch me in handcuffs. You think you can sell the house without consulting us? Charlotte spat each word. I looked at her like one looks at a child caught stealing and lying. I don't think. I know I can. And I already did. Elijah stepped forward, voice raised. This is the family's house. You can't destroy everything out of spite. I burst out laughing, a sound that surprised even me. Family? You call plotting to borrow money against my back, forging my power of attorney, and hiring lawyers to block me family? The female officer cut in, her tone firm. Sir, ma'am, all ownership records confirm this property belongs solely to Mrs. Smith. The search warrant authorizes us only to inspect, not to seize assets. We found no evidence of criminal activity here, so we'll be leaving. Charlotte went pale. Elijah bit his lip, silent. Once the officers left, I walked to the dining table, pulled a thick envelope from my coat pocket, and placed it down. This is a copy of the house sale contract I signed yesterday. The transaction is complete. The money is already somewhere you'll never touch. Charlotte lunged forward to snatch it, but I pulled my hand back. No, this one's mine. You'll get the official documents from the lawyer in a few days. Starting now, you have exactly 4 days to find a new place to live. The room fell into a heavy silence. No more knocking, no more police, only the bare truth left behind. Elijah looked at me, his eyes a mix of shock and panic. Charlotte turned away, clenching her fists so hard her nails dug right into her skin. I lifted my coffee cup, took a sip, and spoke slowly. I told you. When you realized, it would be too late. On Sunday morning, I was about to seal another box when I heard a loud noise downstairs. When I came down, I froze. Elijah and Charlotte were ransacking the living room. Drawers yanked out, papers scattered across the floor. What do you think you're doing? I shouted, my voice booming louder than I expected. Charlotte looked up, eyes sharp as blades. We're looking for the house sale contract. You had no right to do this. If we find it, we'll cancel the deal. I walked straight into the room and stood in front of the drawer she had just opened. Touch anything of mine again, and I'll call the police right now. Elijah picked up a stack of papers, but I snatched it from his hands, papers fluttering to the floor. This is my medical record. How far are you willing to go? Stop pretending, Mom, Elijah snarled. You've changed. You're not putting family first anymore. All you think about is yourself. I let out a harsh, bitter laugh. Thinking about myself? After decades of hard work, paying off debts, buying you a house, watching your kids, enduring your wife's quiet insults. If this is the first time I've put myself first, then it's already too late. Charlotte rushed at me, finger pointing straight to my face. We're not going anywhere. You can't throw us out. I stepped closer, my voice like ice. I'm not throwing you out. The buyers will. And when the police come to enforce it, don't expect me to step in. Elijah's face flushed red, his hands clenched into fists. I saw the fire in his eyes, but he didn't dare do anything. Perhaps because he knew that crossing the line would mean consequences far beyond family matters. I've had enough, I said slowly. You've grown used to my silence. But my silence no longer means acceptance. Charlotte let out a scoff, but my voice rose over hers. In 4 days, I'll hand the keys to the new owners. If you're still here, they'll call the police. And I'll stand with them. Both of them stood frozen. No more excuses, only hatred in their eyes. I bent down, gathered the papers from the floor, shoved them back into the drawer, and slammed it shut so hard the whole room trembled. "If you invade my things again," I said, "there will be no warning next time." Then I walked upstairs, leaving them standing in the middle of the chaos and the truth they couldn't change. That afternoon, I decided to leave the house for a few hours, to breathe different air. I went to a small cafe in the town center, sitting in a quiet corner with a book and a cappuccino. I had barely turned a few pages when my phone buzzed repeatedly. The first message was from my neighbor across the street, "Mrs. Peterson, Abigail, what's going on at your house? I see a moving truck out front, people carrying things out." I immediately called back. "Can you be more specific?" "There are two young men, Charlotte is pointing at them, they're carrying a big wooden cabinet and the dining table to the truck." "I thought you were moving your things." I gripped the phone tighter. "No, those are my belongings." Without thinking, I left the cafe and drove home. When I arrived, the sight before me made my blood boil. The truck doors were wide open, already packed with furniture, most of it the pieces I had listed to take with me. Charlotte was standing in the yard, talking on the phone, signaling to the two men to keep going. Elijah was nowhere to be seen. I pulled over, slammed the car door so hard that everyone turned. "Put everything down," I shouted. My voice echoed across the yard. Charlotte frowned. "Mom, why are you back so early? We were just helping move your stuff faster." "You're too busy." I marched straight to the truck, blocking them before they could take out another item. "These are my personal assets. If you carry out one more thing, I'll call the police right now." The two men exchanged glances, then set the furniture down. Clearly, they didn't want to be part of the dispute. Charlotte stepped closer, her voice low but venomous. "You're overreacting. We have rights too." I pulled out my phone and pressed the speed dial for the sheriff's office. "Your rights end at this doorstep, and this house won't be yours for much longer." Hearing me talk to the police, Charlotte spun around, muttering curses. The truck left just a few minutes later, abandoning the furniture in the driveway. I stood there, staring at the pile of belongings, my heart still pounding. Part of me wanted to break down in tears from anger, but stronger was the clarity. This was proof they were willing to act in secret, outside the law. That night, I sent all the photos and Mrs. Peterson's account to Lawyer Harris. He replied briefly, "Let them build their own case against themselves. It only makes us win easier." I closed the email, looked around at the messy room, and told myself, just 3 more days. 3 days, and it will all be over. The next morning, I got an unusually early call from Harris's office. His voice was serious. "Abigail, you need to know this. Last night, Elijah contacted another brokerage, claiming you were mentally incompetent and asked them to stop the house sale." I sat upright, my heart pounding. Mentally incompetent? Based on what? He submitted a copy of a psychiatric evaluation, but the doctor's signature is clearly forged. I called the clinic listed on the paper, and they confirmed they never examined you. I let out a bitter laugh, though fury surged inside. "They're desperate." "Exactly," Harris said. "But this is serious. If we don't counter it fast, they could delay the sale. I suggest you come to my office this morning to sign an official rebuttal with proof of your health." I agreed, then immediately called Dr. Taylor, my physician of more than 10 years. Within an hour, I had in my hands a certificate declaring my mental health perfectly sound, stamped with his signature and bright red seal. On the way to Harris's office, I thought about every move Elijah and Charlotte had made: forgery, rummaging, trying to steal furniture, and now fabricating a story of incompetence to seize power. Each step was a stab, but also a noose tightening around their own necks. At the office, Harris had the paperwork ready. "We'll file the rebuttal today. I'll also request a formal investigation into the forgery." If their intent to commit fraud is proven, it won't just be a civil matter. I signed each page, my pen strokes firm. Harris, I want to go all in. No more concessions. They must face consequences. He nodded. I understand. At noon, when I got home, Elijah was sitting on the porch, phone in hand, avoiding my eyes. Charlotte wasn't there. I walked past him without stopping, until I heard his voice, Mom, this is going too far. I turned, meeting his gaze. Too far. The day you chose to deceive me, it already went too far. And now, there's no way back. Elijah opened his mouth, but I stepped into the house and shut the door. I had no room left for pity. That afternoon, Harris sent an email, the rebuttal has been accepted by the court, and the house sale proceeds as normal. The forgery investigation will begin this week. I read it, leaned back in my chair, and for the first time in weeks, I truly smiled. Just 2 more days. Monday morning, I was double-checking my boxes when the doorbell rang. On the porch stood a woman in a dark suit, holding a folder. Mrs. Abigail Smith, she asked. That's me. I'm a social worker with Adult Protective Services. We received a report that you may be a victim of financial abuse and need urgent assistance. I frowned slightly. Report from who? That information is confidential, she replied professionally. But I need to ask you some questions and may have to review your living conditions. I understood immediately Elijah or Charlotte had called again, this time posing as concerned helpers to prolong the house sale under a new excuse. Please, come in, I said, keeping my tone calm. She opened her notebook, asking about my income, bank accounts, and health. I answered clearly, showing her Dr. Taylor's health certificate and the statements from the new bank account. Strange, she said. Because the report described you as frail, unable to manage finances, and coerced into signing harmful documents. I laughed, though there was nothing funny. I suppose they forgot I'm the one who initiated the house sale, and every paper was signed personally in front of witnesses. When she reviewed the sale contract and supporting documents, her expression softened. It seems someone is deliberately abusing the system to make things difficult for you. I'll note this in my report and close the file today. Before leaving, she added, if they keep filing false reports, that itself will be a violation of the law. I nodded, thanked her, and closed the door. Anger surged again, but mixed with relief another scheme had been crushed. That afternoon, Martha stopped by with a bag of pastries. When I told her, she rolled her eyes, they really have no shame. Just 2 more days, Liv. Hang in there. We packed the last of the boxes together. My suitcase was ready, and the documents and contract were locked safely in a portable safe. Late at night, as the streetlights cast their glow into the empty living room, I stood looking around. The faded walls, the bare hooks where photos once hung. There was nothing left to keep me here. I whispered into the silence, just 48 more hours. Then everything will be over. And I knew, this ending would be nothing like what Elijah and Charlotte had imagined. The next morning, I received an email from Mr. Jacobs with the subject, change of handover schedule. The message was brief. The buyer has requested to move the handover 1 day earlier, which means we will complete all procedures this afternoon. If you agree, I will arrange everything. I read it again to make sure I wasn't mistaken. This afternoon. Which meant Elijah and Charlotte had less than 10 hours left before losing all rights here. I called Jacobs immediately, I agree. Do it as fast as possible. And keep it confidential. He chuckled softly. Understood. I'll bring the paperwork to your house at 3 p.m. I hung up, stood in the kitchen, and felt a surge of fresh energy. My departure plan was moving up, and they wouldn't have time to maneuver. By noon, Elijah and Charlotte still hadn't returned. I took the chance to call the moving company, requesting them to come that afternoon. Martha was there too, helping me oversee everything, and we worked nearly non-stop. Boxes lined up neatly, the suitcase locked, the portable safe set by the door. Around 2 p.m., I heard a car pulling into the yard. Charlotte stepped out, her face bright, but when she saw the moving truck parked there, her smile froze. "What's this? What are you doing?" I didn't answer right away, just kept signing papers with the movers. Elijah stepped out of the car, frowning. "You said there were still 2 days left." I lifted my head, looking straight at him. "The plan changed. This afternoon I hand over the house." Charlotte stiffened. "No. You can't." I cut her off, my voice ice cold. "I can. And I did. The buyer wanted it earlier, and I agreed. From 4 p.m. today, this will no longer be your house." Elijah took a step forward, his tone sharp. "You're trying to humiliate us." I smirked faintly. "No. This is the consequence of your own choices." At exactly 3 o'clock, Mr. Jacobs arrived. We signed the final papers in the living room, witnessed by Martha and 2 movers. As soon as the pen left the page, Jacobs confirmed, "Transaction complete. The new owner will arrive for the keys within the hour." I tucked the contract into my bag and turned to Elijah and Charlotte. "I'll be gone before they arrive. I suggest you do the same." Charlotte opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. Elijah just stood silent, staring at the floor. I stepped out the door, pulling my suitcase, Martha beside me. The air outside was cool and strangely refreshing. This afternoon, everything would end. And this time, it ended on my terms. As Martha and I pushed the suitcase toward the car, a black SUV suddenly swerved into the yard. The door flew open, and 2 men in suits stepped out, followed by a middle-aged woman with a stern face. The woman walked straight up, pulling a stack of papers from her bag. "Mrs. Abigail Smith. I'm the attorney for Mr. Elijah Smith and Miss Charlotte Smith. We're here to serve notice of a temporary injunction against the handover, just issued by the district court." I heard every word clearly, but I wasn't afraid. "On what grounds?" "My clients allege that you sold the property for less than market value in an attempt to dissipate marital assets, causing damage to their lawful inheritance rights," she read from the documents. I let out a quiet laugh. "This house is not marital property, and they have no inheritance rights while I'm alive. That injunction won't stand for 24 hours. Martha stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You're stalling, and you know it." One of the suited men cut in, demanding I stop moving items until the order was reviewed. I looked at them, then turned to Jacobs, who had just stepped out with his case file. Jacobs raised an eyebrow. "I filed all ownership and legal documents with the court this morning. This order is based on false information. I'll call the judge right now." While Jacobs made the call, I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Please repeat your allegations against me, so I have a record." Elijah's lawyer hesitated briefly but still read them verbatim. Her voice entered the recording, each word distinct. After a few minutes, Jacobs returned, a thin smile on his lips. "The judge has reviewed it. The injunction is void effective immediately. You should leave before the police arrive to support the new owner." Elijah's lawyer's face darkened. She stuffed the papers back into her bag and walked toward the SUV without another word. The 2 men followed, looking frustrated. Charlotte, who had been standing on the porch, suddenly rushed down, screaming, "You'll pay for betraying us, mother." I looked straight at her, my voice low but firm. "No, Charlotte. You'll pay for mistaking kindness as weakness." Less than an hour later, the new owner's car pulled in. They shook my hand, took the keys, and stepped inside the house. Elijah and Charlotte still stood there, frozen, as if they couldn't believe it was truly over. Martha and I got into the car. As we drove away, I glanced at the rearview mirror, 2 figures standing on the porch, lost in a space that no longer belonged to them. And I knew, this battle, I had won cleanly. We hadn't even left the street for 10 minutes when my phone rang. A strange number. I hesitated, but answered. "Mrs. Smith," a deep male voice said. "This is Detective Monroe from the County Police Department. I need you to come to the station this afternoon regarding an ongoing investigation." I frowned. "What case?" "There's been a complaint that you stole personal property belonging to Mr. Elijah and Miss Charlotte Smith during your departure from the recently sold house. We need you here to clarify." I laughed, this time not bothering to hide the mockery. "They are relentless. Regardless, I still need you to come so everything can be formally documented." "The sooner the better," the detective said, his tone not threatening, just serious. Martha glanced at me as I hung up. "Another trick?" "Yes. But this time, I won't just defend myself," I replied. We stopped by the storage unit first. I wanted to collect a few prepared boxes, every invoice, receipt, photo of each household item before moving, with supporting documents proving my purchase. Each had dates, signatures, and bank records attached. At the police station, Detective Monroe received me in a small meeting room. He opened a thin file. "Mrs. Smith, here's the list of items the plaintiffs claim you unlawfully took: the sofa set, wall paintings, the coffee machine, and a portable safe." I calmly laid out each photo and receipt on the table. "Here is the invoice for the sofa from the furniture store in 2018, under my name. Here's the receipt for the painting bought at an exhibition in Denver, also under my name. The coffee machine, a Christmas gift I bought for myself last year. And the portable safe." I slid forward the warranty certificate, purchased with my personal credit card, supported by the bank statement. Monroe went through each document, his expression shifting from suspicion to intrigued. "You really came prepared." I knew they would try everything. So I left no gaps for them to exploit. After nearly half an hour, he closed the file. "I'll note in the report that this claim has no basis. If you want, you can file a countersuit for false accusations." I gave a thin smile. "I'll consider it. But trust me, detective. I never forget." Leaving the police station, I felt my steps lighter. Not because they had failed once again, but because I could see clearly now that each time they attacked, I only stood stronger than before. By late afternoon, golden sunlight stretched across the new path I was walking. And this time, there was no shadow of the old house behind me. That night, I sat alone in the new apartment I had rented, the faint yellow light casting down on an empty table. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock, each second distinct. Though everything was nearly over, my heart still felt heavy. Harris called. His voice was low, deliberate. "Abigail. I just received a report from the investigator. There's something you should know." I swallowed hard. "What is it?" "Last week, while you were busy with the house sale, Charlotte tried to open a credit account under your name. She used forged documents. Fortunately, the bank grew suspicious and refused. But, clearly, they haven't stopped." I closed my eyes, silent. Part of me wasn't surprised, but it still felt as though the breath had been pulled from my chest. "Thank you, Harris. I will think of something." After hanging up, I stepped onto the balcony. The night was quiet, the air chilly. Scattered windows glowed across the opposite apartment block, families perhaps eating dinner together, laughing. A simple image I no longer belonged to. I leaned against the railing, letting memories flood in: family meals, Elijah's laughter as a child, Richard's proud gaze whenever we overcame hardships together. Now all of it was nothing more than faint echoes. Back inside, I opened the small wooden box I still carried. Inside were a few old photographs: Elijah with messy hair, grinning by a treehouse, a family photo on Christmas Day, everyone dressed in red sweaters, and a letter Richard once wrote me, its ink faded with years. I touched each one, feeling as if I were holding an entire life in my hands, a life I had sacrificed everything for, only to end up with distance and estrangement. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You think it's over, mother? It's not. I knew it was Charlotte, but I didn't open it again. I no longer had the strength to reply or to rage. Only a quiet sadness remained, like a thin mist over everything. I set the phone down and sat in the dark for a long time. I had won, in one sense, but it still felt as though I had lost far more than just a house. Perhaps because this victory meant the end of any hope of holding on to what was once called family. Before bed, I closed the wooden box and placed it in the drawer. Outside, the city kept breathing, life went on. And I silently told myself, tomorrow will be different. Or at least, I must believe it will. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. The first light of day streamed through the window, warmer and clearer than I could remember in months. I made myself a cup of black coffee, no sugar, no milk, its pure bitterness like my feelings now, alert, clean, with no space left for old ties. I opened the drawer and took out the small wooden box. Inside were the photos, the letter, and the old house key. I looked at each one for the last time. There was no sharp pain in my chest anymore. They were still part of my memory, but no longer had the power to define me. I placed everything into an envelope, sealed it, and sent it to storage along with the other boxes. Memories, like possessions, should be kept somewhere safe beyond anyone's reach. The phone rang. It was Martha. Liv, what are you planning to do today? I'll close the old bank account, cut every last tie with them, I answered, my voice light. Martha laughed, I'll drive with you. Think of it as your official send-off into freedom. We went to the bank, where I requested to transfer all remaining funds into the new account, severing every link to the old one. The clerk asked if I wanted to keep the old account open. I simply shook my head. Signing the closure felt like shutting a door that had been jammed for years, finally freeing me. By noon, I was at Harris's office. He handed me a folder, all the legal safeguards protecting my assets and blocking Elijah and Charlotte from access. You're safe now, Abigail, he said, and for the first time, I fully believed those words. Leaving the office, Martha and I had lunch at a small cafe by the lake. The breeze carried the scent of fresh water, sunlight shimmered on the surface. I realized I was sitting upright, no longer curled inward as if bracing for some invisible blow. Back at the apartment, I stood on the balcony watching the street below. Cars passed, people walked dogs, children's laughter rang out from the park nearby. The world was still alive, and so was I, but this time, it was for myself. I drew a deep breath, let my shoulders drop, and allowed a true smile to spread. Not because I had gotten revenge, but because I had pulled myself free from the mire. They no longer had the power to touch my life. That afternoon, I cleared my desk and opened a blank page. I wrote the first line, a new beginning. And I knew, from now on, every day I could write my own story, no one else would hold the pen. A week later, my rhythm of life had completely changed. No more tense mornings or angry footsteps pounding the stairs. Instead, there were sparrows chirping at the window and the aroma of coffee filling a tidy kitchen. I began reclaiming things I had long neglected. In the mornings, I walked around the park near my home, where rows of maples were turning shades of gold and red. Each step was light, no longer weighed down by the rush to return to a cold house. I realized that all this time, I had been living like a guest in my own life. Now, I was truly in control. One Tuesday afternoon, I joined a pottery class at the town's art center. Sitting at the wheel, my hands on the soft clay, I felt as though I were reshaping my life itself. There were a few new friends in the class, and we spoke as if we'd known each other for years. No one asked about my past, and I didn't need to explain. Here, I was simply Abigail, a woman learning to create something beautiful. Martha visited often, bringing cheerful stories from her volunteer work. One day, she invited me to join the town's gardening group. Together, we planted flowers along the lakeshore, our hands dirty with soil but our mouths full of laughter. I suddenly realized how long it had been since I laughed like that, not out of mockery or defense, but from genuine joy. In the evenings, I sat by the window to read or wrote in my journal. I wrote about small things I was grateful for: a hot cup of tea on a rainy day, the friendly greeting of the doorman, the golden sunset glowing over the lake. Without anyone to guard against, every ordinary moment felt precious. One weekend night, I invited a few new neighbors for dinner. We shared food, swapped stories, and the apartment rang with laughter. Looking around the table, I saw clearly happiness wasn't something to be bought with suffering. True happiness was feeling safe, being yourself, and being among those who respected you. Before bed, I stood on the balcony, gazing at the city lights flickering. Inside, I felt calm, like the smooth surface of the lake below. I whispered to myself, I've reclaimed my life. And this time, it belongs to me completely. That feeling, I knew, was true happiness. The story is a reminder that a parent's love and sacrifice cannot be treated as an endless obligation. When family ties are replaced by exploitation and harm, choosing to leave is not running away, but protecting one's dignity and peace. Sometimes, loving yourself is the only way to keep living, and also the clearest message that love must be nurtured with respect, not assumed to exist forever.